With no meat on her bones or strength in her legs, this cow is dying in the dirt. Another precious asset lost. For the Maasai herdsman, cows are more than food. They're the currency that pays for everything. But the sun is hot and the ground parched. And as their cattle waste away, these families have suddenly found themselves both poor and hungry.
When you see this cows was like a 300 cow, but now it's remained like even no 100, so like 200 die. It's one family. My father was get sick. I take the hospital because of loss of a lot of cow. I feel so bad. It's pain.
They've lost so many of their cattle, they don't even try to move the bodies.
We're just a few steps away from the houses here. People are living surrounded by the remains of their dead cows. They tell me this district alone has lost 15,000 cows since the drought began. And it's the people with nothing to fall back on who are the most vulnerable.
Safina and her 5 children are surviving on sugar and maize. Her oldest son is showing signs of malnutrition.
Since July, it has been bad. These children have not had any milk since then. So they become sick like this one. We're only eating once or twice a day.
People are suffering from drought in many parts of Tanzania. But for months, ministers denied there was a problem.
The
state of food in the country is not bad. Of course, the weather is different in different parts of the country, so harvesting of food from different regions has always been varied, regardless of the rains.
They have now had to admit that more than 1 million people are going hungry. And one of Tanzania's leading academics told me the whole country is affected.
This year has been very severe in most parts of Tanzania. We see droughts in Morogoro, for example. We see drought in the central part of Tanzania, and virtually everywhere.
And it's the poorest who are most at risk. Without specialist knowledge or resources, many put themselves in nature's hands.
Last year, this field was full of rice, but this year it just won't grow because there's just not enough water, and I'm scared. If the rain comes, there is hope for tomorrow, but we do not dare to hope.
Both Christian and Muslim leaders in Tanzania have asked their followers to pray for rain, because with no irrigation and with water sources running dry, both man and beast are looking to the sky.
Well, what can be done more than praying to affect this situation? To talk more about the disastrous drought in East Africa, we can cross over now live to Lucy Taylor, who put that report together for us with her colleague Dan Ashby. She's now in Arusha in northern Tanzania. Good morning. Thanks for being with us, Lucy. You were on the ground there talking to people who are direly affected by this drought. What are they going to do if the rains don't come?
This is the critical time, actually, because for many parts of East Africa, this is the time when they're expecting rain. They want it now or in the next few weeks. Of course, weather patterns vary, but for most places in East Africa, they don't get rain all year round. They get rain in seasons, and those seasons determine your fortunes for the rest of the year if you're someone who lives off the land. So people are waiting, they're hoping. In some places there has been some rain, but in some places not still. And the truth is, for those people, at this point, there's very little they can do. The people I spoke to told me they feel helpless, they feel that this is an act of God or of nature, and really the only thing they can do now it's come to this is to sit and wait and hope and pray that the skies open and the rains fall.
Okay, as well as praying, they're certainly looking to the government for help. But for a long time, the government of Tanzania refused to even admit that there was a problem. Why did Tanzanian officials refuse to face this reality for so long?
In Tanzania, this came as something as a surprise. In other parts of southern and eastern Africa, there was drought last year as well. But it didn't affect Tanzania very badly. And the government's own figures, they say the country actually had a surplus of maize last year. They were even exporting food to surrounding countries which did have food shortages. So for a long time, the government and the ministers were saying there can't be food shortages in Tanzania at the moment. We know we had enough food last year, so there isn't one this year. And they were really trying to play down fears of some countrywide disaster. The president even reportedly spoke to a rally and told people that if you're struggling to feed your family, you need to work harder. We're not going to provide food relief because this country has enough food. Since then, it's become something that they can't deny. In the last few weeks, they have softened that stance and said that they will try to help people where they can. They will release maize at cheaper prices in the areas that are feeling the most extreme food shortages. And partly that's because this became a political issue. One of the leaders of the opposition actually threatened a vote of no confidence in the president himself if any Tanzanians began to die of hunger. So far, we don't know of any cases where people are dying directly related to hunger in this country, thankfully, but it shows how important this issue is.
Okay, Lucy, you just mentioned government subsidies for food prices. I mean that would be something the government can do. What else can it do, you know, at a time when these droughts are now becoming an annual occurrence?
Yeah, well, as you say, for many people, this is the second year in a row. Last year, I was in Malawi, which was experiencing drought back then, caused by the El Nino effect, so variable patterns of rain and dry spells, which were having a devastating effect on crops. So this is something that is happening more and more regularly, and many of the countries that were affected last year are affected again this year. The problem is it's difficult for governments to build resilience, and particularly at the time that this has happened. So right now, when people are already feeling the consequences, they're already struggling. Now it's difficult for governments to step in and help without outside help. One of the solutions is food relief. That's happening in Malawi and in other countries around, but so far not here in Tanzania. Apart from that, it's about long-term planning, and the solutions actually are simple. They're about conserving water management, diversifying crops, giving people simple irrigation systems, but they're difficult to achieve because of the geography and the dynamics of these countries. There's a very poor population spread out over a very large area, so it's difficult for governments to step in and intervene without some support from outside.
Okay, that outside support will be very important right now, no doubt, as will be the long-term steps you were talking about. But, you know, as certain crops and foods become scarce or too expensive to buy, are people looking for alternatives?
They are, in parts, and there are some really good projects to give people education about different alternatives. So there's a form of sweet potato, which is drought resistant. There's another vegetable called cassava, which people are growing, which is thought to be more hardy at times when there's no rain. But this is a big risk for individual farmers. If you're someone who's grown maize for your whole life, your whole family grow maize, you know how to grow maize and you understand how that crop works. It's a big risk then for you to put your savings into buying a different crop, which you don't have any knowledge of, and you don't know whether it's going to be successful. And many people fear there won't be a market for those crops once they've grown them. So it can be difficult to persuade farmers to look for alternatives. And also, perhaps understandably, people are reluctant to change the food that they've been eating for their whole lives.
That was Lucy Taylor joining us from Arusha in northern Tanzania. We have to leave it there. Lucy, thanks so very much for your time, for the interview, and for your report. Thank you, Lucy.